Welcome back. This is Douglas from Gaijin-Eyes again. In this tutorial, we'll begin by looking at your homework from the previous tutorial. I asked you if you could make a text style which would give you this effect. I'll now show you how I created this style. Select the text and go down to the Edge button. Open. You have the edge styles. Remember that the stacking order of these 5 edge styles actually appears in reverse order. So T5 will be at the top. It's also important to have the same setting for position. You have 3 choices: center, inside, or outside. In this case, the best effect will be by using outside. And as you set each different layer, you will have to make sure that you always set outside. Let's begin by clicking to the left here, then select T5, then the color, and this one is going to be purple. OK. You will notice that the position changed back to center. So now I must make sure I have it set finally to outside. The edge width of 2 is fine. Move up to the next layer and switch on. Go to the color choice, and this one is going to be green. Let's take a bright green. OK. Make this on the outside. The edge width is 2, which is the same as the purple, so you can't see the green. I'll increase this to 4. Now you can see the green. Next layer up, switch it on, choose the color, and this one is going to be yellow. OK. Make sure it's on the outside, and now we have to increase this to 6. Next one, switch on, choose the color, red. On the outside, and increase this to 8. Finally, T1, color, choose a blue color. OK, it's on the outside, and increase this to 10. Now we have the effect. At this stage, I would go to Text Styles and save this as a new style. That's how I would go about using the 5 different edge layers. When you're working with text, for example, in a lower third, instead of having the text maybe fade in, hold for a moment, and then fade out again, it's very likely you'd like to have some kind of background to the text, and it's there that splines come into play. In this tutorial and in the next 2 tutorials, I'm going to be looking closer at splines and how to use them. And this is the effect that I'll show you how to create. First of all, make sure that you select the container for your text effect. Add new media. The 2 main choices for splines are spline object and spline primitive. We are going to use spline object. When you choose spline object, the tools here in the toolbox will change. And you have 4 different possibilities for creating spline objects. You can use the pen tool, pencil tool, rectangle tool, or oval tool. In this case, we're going to choose the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle which will cover the text. To make it easier to work with, we'll collapse all of these parts of the spline track into the spline master track. So now we have the spline master track above the text. Left click, grab the track and drag it down below the text. While showing you how I'm going to adjust the spline track, I'll switch off the text track's visibility so that we can concentrate on the spline. This spline is a 2D spline. In later tutorials we'll be looking at extruded 3D splines, but for now it's the 2D spline. Open up the spline track again. Here is the spline object that we created. I'll select it, and now I'm able to apply, for example, a gradient style. I'll choose this one. Go to the control panel for the spline object. If I go to Fill, you can see I have the gradient style here. Fill is on. Now I'll go to Border, and I'll choose the first one. Make it a bright yellow color. We'll increase the width so you can see it very clearly, like that. Now, if I switch on the text track again, it looks like this. Not very good. In fact, if I go to the text track, Controls, I might want to turn on the drop shadow. The drop shadow can be adjusted here for distance, opacity, and so on. I'll switch off the text track's visibility again so that we can concentrate on the spline and take a closer look at the spline object and wonder how we can make it more interesting. I'll now show you a couple of ways with which you can bring some life to the spline object. Make sure you're at the beginning of the timeline. Select the first keyframe. At this point, I'm going to make a short detour to show you a setting which I would recommend you check out. Go to Edit, down to Project Settings, and make sure that Hold Parameter Values is switched on. OK. With the keyframe at the start here selected, I'm going to go to Fill and change the opacity to 0. The fill will disappear. I'll change the interpolation from constant to hold. Now go to Border. Down here to where it says Border Begin and Border End. Begin is at 0 and End is at 100. Change this to 0. Now the border will disappear. Put this on hold. Move along the timeline a little. Ctrl N to make a new keyframe on the spline object track, and change the interpolation for border end to linear. Now I'll move along, say here, Ctrl N to make a new keyframe, and I'll make this 100. Now I have a border which will draw on. After the border has drawn on, make sure you have selected the keyframe where it's at 100%, change to fill, and from here I want fill to start appearing. Now I'll move along here, Ctrl N, and change this to 100. Now we have the border and then the fill. I'd like everything to fade out at the end, and instead of doing this individually for every parameter, I go up to the container for the whole effect and select the point near the end, Ctrl N to make a keyframe, and on the container control panel, go to opacity, change this to linear, then move to the last keyframe for the container and make this 0. That will give me a fade out for everything here. This ability to animate the fill and the border is a good way of adding some extra interest to your titles. Before leaving this tutorial, I'd like to go back to the border control. Remembering the homework that you did on the text with these borders, you could, instead of just having a yellow border, add more than one border and animate them on separately. Here is another interesting thing you can do with borders. I'll move back to the start here on the timeline. If you look at the border controls, you'll see that the edge color can be animated. You have keyframe possibilities here. So for fun, here's what I could do. Put this on hold. The yellow color will be holding as we write on. Once it's written on and the text starts appearing, we'll add another keyframe on the spline object track, Ctrl N, and change the interpolation for the color to linear. Go forwards a bit. Make a new keyframe for the spline object and choose a different color. For example, blue. OK. Now the yellow border writes on, and after the fill and the text appear, the border gradually changes to blue. The final effect in real time looks like this. That's the end of this first basic look at spline objects. In the next tutorial, we'll continue looking at the creation and control of spline objects. And that's all for this one. Bye for now.